If you want me to feed you exactly what you want to hear, don't come to my channel. However, if you want to hear the most accurate and unbiased news possible, you're in the right place. So without further ado, this is my election prediction of Harris versus Trump based on the latest polls in all 50 states. And before we go further, make sure to like and subscribe to join the 3%. Thank you, and back to the video. And I'll cover Josh Shapiro, the most likely candidate to become the vice presidential nominee from the Democrats, and his past and present views on the Middle East. So I covered J.D. Vance not that long ago and his past views, and the same can be said with Josh Shapiro. His views of 30 years ago when he was a student at the University of Rochester were, to say the least, very different from his views now, and very different from the views of the mainstream Democratic Party. He wrote an opinion article saying, quote, "Peace, not possible," and he said, "Peace is virtually impossible and will never come in the Middle East." And you might be saying, doesn't he support the two-state solution? Well, according to a spokesperson for him, his opinion has changed and he supports a two-state solution. And like with Vance, I do think that over the course of however many years college elapses between that and when someone becomes a prominent political figure, their opinions can and probably do change. But the bottom line is, how will the Democrat voters who voted uncommitted because they did not support their own president's stance on a two-state solution, what will those voters think about Josh Shapiro and his past comments? And take of this what you will. And anyways, we'll get back to the prediction. So, without further ado, let's begin. And we'll start with the West Coast and go towards the East Coast. So Washington, Oregon, and California are all led by West Coast cities: Seattle and Washington, Portland in Oregon, and Los Angeles in California. These West Coast cities will forbid any of these three states from voting Republican. As you can see, Trump actually loses in Oregon by only 5 percentage points, but it does seem like, judging by past trends, Oregon will not go to Democrats. And Oregon is the closest out of the three, so Oregon has a chance of not being safely to Harris, but it'll almost certainly go to Harris regardless. And we go down to Hawaii, which will also go to Harris. Hawaii is in the Pacific Ocean. It's a collection of islands, and it almost always votes Democrat. You can see pretty solidly it'll vote Democrat. Alaska will vote Republican, even though Alaska did have a little bit of a scare for Republicans back in 2020, and it might not safely go Republican in 2024. It'll almost certainly go to Republican, especially judging by polls. So we can say it actually will safely go to Donald Trump. So you can see that California being the biggest prize already makes Harris's lead 78-3. So Trump really has to come back from this because California is such a big deal with 54 electoral votes. But you can see Trump will pretty quickly get back. He starts with Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah. Those 4 states get him another 17 electoral votes up to 20. And the closest state out of the 4 is Utah. So I'll look at these polls, and you can see in the state of Utah, Trump is leading by as much as plus 29, and actually plus 32 in that poll. And I'm going to say he's probably going to win by around 25 percentage points. That makes sense to me. So now we have our first swing states of this cycle, which are Nevada and Arizona. They have a combined 17 electoral votes, but in an election that will be as close as this one, 17 electoral votes are a big deal. It can bring Trump within distance of catching up to Harris. And so we'll look at each state independently since they're both extremely important. So in Nevada, Trump is leading by 1 percentage point, and according to the polling market prediction, Nevada has a 61% chance of going to Donald Trump. And Nate Silver is basically what you would call an election guru. He loves this stuff. He lives for it. And he's an expert on this. I'm going to say that much. He didn't say Trump would win, but he gave Trump almost a 30% chance of winning, which was one of the highest odds out of any of the political pundits at that time period. So we could give him a little bit of the benefit there that he actually gave Trump a solid chance, while other markets gave Trump like only a 10% chance. And Nate Silver says that the election is a toss-up, but Trump has a 55% chance of winning. And so Nate Silver has the polling average in Nevada at Donald Trump leading. And even though the week change is significantly towards Harris, and here's why I think that doesn't necessarily mean as much as you may originally think. This week change is practically considering Biden being switched with Harris. So all of this is basically Harris's chances of winning this election versus Biden's. After Harris becomes the mainstream candidate and fully replaces Biden in everyone's mind, this will stop changing so much as Harris will essentially just take Biden's place. And even though she does get her little polling bump, it's not going to continue to the point where she'll overtake Trump in the state of Nevada. And just as a little other piece of news, Harris actually officially earned enough votes to win the Democratic nomination. And so this means she's practically going to be the nominee, and it's pretty much official. So you can see on Polymarket, Michelle Obama only has a 1% chance of being the nominee, and that's because Harris is practically the official nominee at this point. And so, with all that being said, let's go forward. So Arizona is another swing state, and it is going to Donald Trump, even in partisan polls. The polling average does have Donald Trump winning in Arizona. In fact, by 2.5 percentage points. And the prediction markets say the same story, where Donald Trump is leading in Arizona. So Donald Trump gets this little western area, and he gets up to 37 electoral votes. However, Harris will expand her lead with Colorado and New Mexico. Colorado and New Mexico were not really close since 2016, and according to betting markets, they will not be close in 2024 either. And even though they won't safely go to Harris, they will still go to Kamala Harris. We can see in the polls in both of these states. We'll start with Colorado, just alphabetical order. Colorado, Biden leads by a significant margin. And in New Mexico, Biden also leads. So we'll just switch Biden with Harris. And Harris does better than Biden does. So it does seem like Harris will win in the state of New Mexico. So that's why Harris gets up to 93 electoral votes. So now these next states will bring some more votes to Donald Trump. Because you can see he's behind by over 50 electoral votes. And you may be asking, you think this election is close? Why is he behind by so much? Well, Trump starts to make a comeback here. He wins North Dakota, he wins South Dakota, he wins Nebraska's first and third, as well as Nebraska. He wins Kansas, and he wins Oklahoma. Because remember, all of these states did go to Donald Trump back in 2020, with the closest being Kansas. And for the sake of keeping true to my promise of looking at the polls, I'll look at the polls in the state that was closest back in 2020, which was Kansas. And Kansas is polling towards Donald Trump by plus 16. The last poll was so long ago because it's basically a waste of money to post new polls, since Donald Trump is almost certainly going to win in this state. If the state was closer, there'd be more polls on the subject. But now Donald Trump makes most of his comeback, and in fact leads Harris after winning the state of Texas. So Texas people did see would be a contender for Biden back in 2020, but obviously Biden didn't win in 2020, nor will he win in 2024. And if you need me to prove this, the polls will prove it, where Donald Trump leads by 9 percentage points, outperforming the Senate candidate Ted Cruz. So he gets the state of Texas and gets himself to 100 electoral votes. Nebraska's 2nd district, which is extremely urban, will go to Kamala Harris, however, bringing her to 94 electoral votes. And she takes the lead with Minnesota, which gives us 10 electoral votes to Kamala Harris. And now she leads by 4 electoral votes over Donald Trump. And even though Minnesota is in the Midwest, it will likely go to Kamala Harris for a few reasons. Minnesota has gone to Democrats in almost every race in the state, so Democrats essentially lead the entire state. Minnesota is polling very heavily for Harris, and its polls continue to go more and more towards Kamala Harris. Minnesota is one of the few swing states that actually stuck with Clinton back in 2016, and it went to Biden pretty significantly in 2020. So it's safe to say that Harris will win Minnesota. But Trump has a state of his own that will bring him 2 points ahead of Harris, which is Iowa. Also Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Iowa will be the closest out of these 4 states, and the polls in Iowa indicate a Trump victory, where Trump is leading plus 12 against Biden. But this partisan poll, so we'll go to another poll, which has Trump leading by 18 points. And against Harris, it would probably be similar, maybe 15 points, but still a safe state nonetheless. He won it in 2020 by about 8 percentage points, and he'll win by more in 2024. So at this point, Harris is now the one that needs a comeback, but remember, the East Coast is very promising for her. So since the South will go to Trump, the East Coast will go to Harris, the Rust Belt will decide this election. So we start off the Rust Belt with Wisconsin, and we'll first look at how the polls are doing in Wisconsin. And the polls are up for Harris. Harris has been leading in the recent polls in Wisconsin. And the prediction markets, they say Trump will win in Wisconsin, but just barely. So I'll look at Predicted, which is another prediction market, and again, Josh Shapiro will be the vice presidential nominee. You heard it from me first, and I'll continue to say it. But anyways, Wisconsin is likely to go to Harris, according to Predicted. So I will give the tie break to Nate Silver. Nate Silver says Wisconsin is going to Harris. So Harris wins the state of Wisconsin very narrowly, but she wins it nonetheless. Yet she's still 16 points behind Donald Trump. But that changes real fast with Illinois. Illinois is home to J.B. Pritzker, a very popular governor, and it also is significantly polling for Harris. There aren't even any polls because everyone knows which way Illinois will go. Illinois went to Biden by 17. And now with 275 electoral votes up for grabs, Harris leads Trump by 3 and leads RFK Jr. by a whopping 133. But now we get to where Trump may thrive. Let's go to Michigan. So Michigan has been polling first towards Trump, then towards Harris, and it has continued to poll towards Harris. These Bloomberg polls do seem like outliers, saying Michigan will go to Harris by double digits, while the betting markets say that it'll go to Harris with a 55% chance is a little ludicrous. I think if Harris wins Michigan, it'll be by 1 to 2 percentage points. Because remember, Biden only won it by 2.8. So I do think, with all the facts in mind, it does seem like Michigan will go to Harris, but only by a narrow margin. And she leads Trump by 18 electoral votes. But Trump rectifies this with Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi, rocketing towards 166 electoral votes. Indiana may be the closest out of these four, but it still went to Trump by 16 in 2020. So it's safe to say all four will go to Donald Trump, as well as Alabama with its 9 electoral votes. So Trump leads Harris by a pretty significant margin, but still she has her Northeast. But Trump gets another win with Ohio. Ohio went to him by 8 percentage points and has been polling pretty well for Donald Trump. These polls from the ARP, a major interest group, do have Trump leading by +9 or even +10. And I do think that's about right considering all the other polls on the topic. So Trump wins the state of Ohio. He also wins West Virginia. And now we get to Georgia. So Georgia is another swing state in this election, and Georgia's polls only have Trump winning by narrow margins. We can see this poll that is a partisan poll has Harris in the lead, but this poll from Trafalgar usually has a tilt towards Donald Trump, and it has Trump winning by +2. Most of the polls do have Trump winning, and we can see in Nate Silver's average that Trump is in the lead, as well as Polymarket, which says Georgia has a 59% chance of going to Donald Trump. So Donald Trump will win Georgia in 2024, and he takes a pretty commanding lead in this election. But now we'll start from the top and go to Maine. Harris will start her comeback in the state of Maine, winning its 2 electoral votes, as well as Maine's 1st district. Maine's 1st district is both northeast and urban, so obviously it is going to Harris. Maine's 2nd district is in a pretty contentious state, being Maine, and is more rural, so it is going to Trump. But Harris starts her comeback with 2 points from Maine. New Hampshire is very similar to Maine, but is a little closer. New Hampshire will go to Harris, but not by as much as Maine will go to Harris by. New Hampshire goes to Harris by +5 or +6. Maine will go to Harris by +8-ish. Maine's polls have Harris up by around +7 or +8. Harris also wins in Vermont, taking home its 3 electoral votes. Vermont very solidly went to Biden. And she'll also win Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. All 3 also solidly went to Biden. New York will also go to Harris, despite the inroads that Republicans have made in the state. And so will New Jersey, even though New Jersey Democrats are not the most popular right now. And New Jersey went to Biden by 16, but its polls are going more and more towards Donald Trump in 2024. So now Harris actually very quickly takes the lead and is leading Trump by 9 electoral votes. Trump can get the lead back with the state of Pennsylvania, and we'll look at the polls in this state. Trump takes a pro-fracking stance, which is a very big issue in the state, galvanizing more of the rural voters. On the other hand, Harris has Philadelphia, and it's many voters voting for her. Almost 90% of Philadelphia voters will likely vote for Harris. But according to this partisan poll, Trump is leading in the state of Pennsylvania. However, due to her likely picking Governor of Pennsylvania Josh Shapiro as her VP nominee, Pennsylvania may likely go to Harris in this election. Now she actually leads 241 to 213, and this election is slipping from Trump's hands. The slip continues with Delaware, Maryland, and D.C., which puts Harris 13 away from winning this election. And she wins this election with the state of Virginia. So the polls do currently have Harris winning this election. But remember, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are so close, and they're toss-ups in this election. They're essentially 50-50. While the polls do slightly have them going to Harris, these states are essentially 50-50, and if I could classify them as such, I would. They're just very narrowly going to Harris. They average around a 51% chance of going to Harris. So the odds are that Trump will win one of these 3 states. But in light of looking at the polls and saying exactly what the polls are saying, these 3 states are all going to Harris. However, Trump gets his comeback with North Carolina. North Carolina is going to him like it did in 2016 as well as 2020. The Bloomberg polls, which had Harris leading by double digits in Michigan, have Trump leading in North Carolina. Also, Trump leads in South Carolina, not surprising, and he leads in Florida, a state that was once the closest state in the 2000 election, is now not really a swing state anymore. It will almost certainly go to Trump according to Polymarket, and the polls also indicate this, with Trump leading by around 7 in Florida. So there we have it. That is the election forecast according to the polls as of right now. So thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want more.